So I was going to a coaching session a few months ago, and this gentleman, he had just finished reading this book. And basically, the whole thesis of it was hire slow, fire fast. And sure enough, that's what he was doing. He was hiring slow and he was firing fast. And one of the, sometimes, a person will make a mistake and they would just, be gone. And we're kind of talking about that thought process and exactly, where all that kind of comes from, because I had some slightly different thoughts. So I do want to spend a few minutes to kind of pull up under the lid there and kind of see what the truth really is. So just hang on for a few minutes and we'll come back to that about this whole hiring slow, hiring fast, and let's just see where we actually land. Welcome back to another episode of John the PM, where we believe that managing projects is not just a job, but a way of life. Today, I want to talk about terminations. Not, the full scope of it. My personal belief is that if you do a termination, then you really should be able to leave off as friends. Don't take the arguments too far. It really shouldn't be like a surprise to the individual you're letting go. And if you do it correctly, you're really kind of looking at it from their, from the heart, but from their perspective. That old cliche, I'm allowing you to be a free agent. The way I kind of look at it is maybe that you're not a good fit here. That doesn't mean that you're a bad person. It just means you're not a good fit here. Let's find somewhere, a location where you will be a star. So I kind of led that, with my philosophy for most of my, adult professional career, and it's boded me well. Now I grew up in a, couple of Fortune 500 companies. The first one was a unionized environment, so that's where some of my attitudes about, terminations really kind of came from. And believe it or not, it kind of laid out the basic format, and it seemed to work then, and it still work. And basically, 3 strikes, final straw, and then you're terminated. So you can have, somebody makes a mistake or something, whatever the issue is. You might do a verbal, counseling. That doesn't mean that you do not, jot it down and put in your drop file. That doesn't mean that. You still need to document it and put it in your drop file. Second time they break a rule infraction, whatever the issue may be, you may do like a written, counseling. And then a third one might be, a formal written personal improvement plan. Maybe the fourth one, final straw. If you do this again, we're finished. And usually what kind of happens is that it provides a very good roadmap. It kind of forces you to articulate excruciatingly clear detail, exactly what the behavior or the results that the individual is performing, the negative results or the maladaptive behavior that they're exhibiting, that you can get crystal clear what you need to happen, so that they can be a success in your organization. Now, there's a whole lot of things up under that, certainly not going to cover through all of them, but I personally believe that the leader, should set the example. So that's kind of like the thumbnail sketch on like termination. But now let's look at the other side. Is it always necessary? And this is a good question just to ask yourself, because people will make mistakes. The question is, was it one of for nefarious reasons, like they are purposely trying to sabotage you and they're bad actors, to which you do need to move them out of the organization, as quickly as possible? Or maybe the infraction that they did is so grievous that it can result in somebody's loss of life, limb, or eyesight. Sometimes I call that the broken plate theory. John, what do you mean by the broken plate theory? Well, sometimes if you break a plate, you can't just put it back together, with I'm sorry, my bad, those kind of things. So I call that the broken plate theory. However, and I just want to present this, and we kind of talked through this during our coaching session, you may actually want to use it as a teaching moment. Hey, a mistake was made. Awesome. It is what it is. The water under the bridge, it has been done. You may actually be able to help the person understand what has happened, why it has happened, so that they don't do it again. They might not actually know about the issue and or concern, because it could be, downstream or upstream from them. They may not know what the cause of events that actually occurred. But now if you actually teach them, they can be out for the warning sign, especially if they took it to heart. I've been in multiple organizations where if you made like one mistake, boom, you're out. And to me, what all that happened was that you might have spent 3 years training this individual, and they make a mistake, boom, they're gone. What good did all that do? The other side of it too is that the only way to get experience is to like get experience. And guess what? Issues will come up. I do encourage my folks, and I encourage teams to take risk all the time. The key is to keep the risk small so that if a mistake is made, it is not detrimental. Can recover from it. So whatever risk you take, just make sure it's small so that perhaps you can use it as a teaching moment. Now, if you have too many teaching moments, obviously you might have to go through a discipline cycle, just to kind of keep everything kind of settled. But there is a huge possibility that they may actually learn from what has happened, and then they will not make that mistake again. And in fact, they can become a role model for other people. When people say, or they notice that somebody else is about to do about the same thing, and they say, "Oh, you know what? I did that once. It wasn't really good. This is what's going to happen." So things can happen. The other thing too is sometimes just ask yourself, are you that perfect? Just out of curiosity. I could go on for a minute or two, actually. Hopefully, it kind of summed it up. But there is one last point I do want to make. If you do make into an issue of where there is zero defect, in other words, like we will not tolerate any incidents, no mistakes at all, a couple of things could happen. One is that you could drive the issues underground, and nobody is going to resurrect the issue, into which case you're going to have a big issue when it does resurrect. The second thing that could happen is that people stop taking risk. Okay. And that can be detrimental too. They're always kind of waiting for you to say yes. And that could be a problematic as well. So just be kind of mindful of that. Well, if you enjoyed this session of John the PM, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. My staff and I would greatly appreciate it. Helps us to be back of service back to you. In the meantime, may all of your projects be highly successful.